Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Quiet down over there at the end.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could please join Commissioner McCarroll in the flag salute.
Ready, begin. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Wiley. Vice Chair Barber.
Here.
Commissioner McCarroll.
Here.
Commissioner Spear. Here. And Commissioner Jessup. Here. Commissioner Stevie. Here. And Commissioner Corral. Here.
Now consideration of the minutes. Are there any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call for the vote.
Vice Chair Barber.
Yes.
And Commissioner McCarroll.
Yes.
Commissioner Spear. Commissioner Jessup.
Yes.
Commissioner Stevie.
Yes.
And Commissioner Corral. Yes.
Are there any written communications?
None of this time.
Oral communications? All right. So open the hearings for business. Staff report on historical preservation, duties as planning commissioners. Staff give their report, please.
And good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alex Rangel, Assistant Planner for our Planning Division, and I'll be presenting you a brief overview of the Planning Commission's new roles and responsibilities with relation to historic preservation for the city of Escondido. As a general background for what has occurred within the city of Escondido, this is a general timeline for the historic preservation adoptions that we had to the city. The original historic sites inventory survey was conducted in 1983, which listed roughly 900 properties that were addresses that were considered historic at the time. Each one had a general rating from A to D as far as how historic they were, and then maps were plotted throughout the properties. Another addition to the historic survey was conducted in 1988, which added street markings, curb markings, other sort of like the hitching rings, and some of the minor landmarks that we have throughout the city to this day. The final review of that and the comprehensive update was conducted in 1990, which is the publicized historic sites inventory that we currently have at this time. The old Escondido Historic Districts overlay was officially adopted and approved in 1991 as part of the follow-up to the 1990 general plan. And then the local register was created in 1992. Approximately 200 some odd properties were added to our local register as part of, for lack of a better term, batch processing with our HBC for properties which met the criteria that still exists to this day. In 2001, Escondido went through a second significant update to the historic sites inventory, which added roughly another 800 properties to the inventory as we have it. The background more so to why we are here today. On February 21st, 2024, our City Council brought Ordinance 2024-03, officially dissolving the Historic Preservation Commission, which is an effort to streamline the process of historic review and bring the city more into conformance with our comprehensive economic development strategy for the sets, to incentivize more development and a more streamlined process for all of our projects throughout the city. On March 26, 2024, Planning Commission was brought the effective ordinances for the dissolution of HPC, which was under case number PL 240017, which I believe about 3 of our commissioners were part of that review. So this affected articles of the Escondido Zoning Code, Article 40, our historical resources, Article 61, which is our administrative enforcement, Article 64, which is our design review, and Article 65, which is for our old Escondido neighborhood. On March 26th, these were repeated on that one. So this was additionally discussed by our commission in January 9th and January 23rd, as far as what substantive changes there would be and understanding what these processes would entail. On April 17th, 2024, City Council reviewed the proposed amendments and they were adopted under Ordinance 2024-05, approving the code amendments. The ordinance was officially adopted on May 8th, 2024, and is in effect as of June 7th this year, 2024. This slideshow provides a brief overview of the responsibilities which have been shifted as a result of the historic code amendments which were approved. This information is also provided in Table 1 in staff reports that are presented to you today. With the changes to the zoning code, the following project types now fall under the Planning Commission's purview as far as their jurisdiction, which I'll go over in further detail as we continue this presentation. Number 1 is going to be certificates of appropriateness, which are typical design review projects. Non-emergency demolitions of significant historic structures. Mills Act recommendations, which will be brought to the city manager after your approval, and historic district designations. To date, no items have been brought forward directly to the Planning Commission for their review since the ordinance's adoption until later today. So the first project type that we're going to be looking at today is going to be the most common, which is under the Planning Commission's purview, which is a certificate of appropriateness, or a C of A, as identified in section 33798 of the City of Escondido zoning code. A C of A is a certificate issued by the Director of Development Services, approving the alteration, restoration, construction, removal, or relocation of property identified as a historic resource. These permits range from minor COAs, which are typically staff level administrative review, which is like exterior paint, minor additions, minor remodels, other things of that nature, up to major COAs, which are more significant construction, major construction, additions, alterations, and something that more significantly changes the property scope. So major COAs for properties on the local register are the only COAs that will typically be brought to the Planning Commission for their review. Properties that are on the local register outside of the old Escondido neighborhood are typically staff level decisions. However, the director does have the opportunity to bring these to your review should they find the project to be significant enough for your review. Local register properties that are within the OEN will all be brought to your review. So the planning division typically follows the following resources in order to conduct project design review prior to their bringing them to your staff review. The design guidelines for homeowners historic resources, which is provided to you under attachment 1, which is a hyperlink that you can take a look at if you haven't already. The state's Office of Historic Preservation, which offers preservation technical notes, technical information that we take a look at from time to time. The National Park Service's Secretary of Interior Standards for Restoration and Rehabilitation of Historic Structures, and various other architectural books which aid in identifying the architectural structures, the significance, and other features that may come into our review. As the design guidelines are probably as the design guidelines are the official guidelines that the city has adopted via ordinance, I will go over them now in much greater detail for you. So the design guidelines for homeowners historic resources, again, is the city's official document regarding the preservation, treatment, and rehabilitation of single-family homes throughout the city of Escondido. This document is provided again to the Planning Commission and through staff report. And this document was originally adopted by City Council in December of 1991, with a major revision that came into it, cleaning up, providing additional information in August of 2022. This was prepared in conjunction with planning staff, architectural design review boards, the old Escondido neighborhood group at the time of 2022 or 2002 when it was updated. And this document was primarily developed with the old Escondido neighborhood in mind. However, of course, the city has utilized this information for other properties throughout the city. This document contains a plethora of valuable information for review, including residential design guidelines, preservation and rehabilitation recommendations, new construction, alteration, addition recommendations, and other considerations that anyone would have for construction. Prior to items being presented to the Planning Commission, staff will review the project for conformance with these guidelines and Escondido zoning code and other resources in order to present a more refined product for your review. Some of the examples that are within the design guidelines involve repair and rehabilitation of properties that are within the city. They do provide such guidance as acceptable or not acceptable guidance for treatment, to include best practices for installation, treatment, repair, to ensure preservation of the physical and visual character of these properties that are brought to the purview. One of the common questions that planning and building often have is usually with like energy improvements for energy efficiency for these kinds of things. The design guidelines has a lot of guidance, which I provided for you to take a look at, which is again, a brief look, but it has information for weather stripping, installation, repair of windows, doors that are not under conformance with current building code standards. Additions to historic homes are also covered in very great detail within the design guidelines. They go over such considerations such as site location, architectural compatibility, material compatibility, windows, doors, roof finish, with the goal to preserve the historic character of the original and maintaining the overall shape, materials, colors, settings, and the arrangement of visually defined features. Additions also recommended to be carefully placed within the property so that they minimize any changes that may impact the property's appearance from public view. Planning staff heavily recommends to property owners as well as the planning commission to take consideration of the design guidelines to account for any residents that are brought into review. Now I'd like to briefly discuss another item of the planning commission's jurisdiction, which will be the initial review of non-emergency demolition permits. These permits are voluntary requests to demolish identified historic resources. They're typically in conjunction with the development permit to some capacity. These permit requests are initially reviewed by the planning staff to determine their significance of the resource. And if the resource is determined to be significant, then further review will need to be done by the planning division and subsequently to the city council with a duly noticed public hearing. They review these requests and the required findings of fact are in the Escondido zoning code under section 33803, which goes under both reviews such as the significance of the resource and for both city and state guidelines. Planning division uses again design guidelines for homeowners with historic resources, which provides options for like restoration and relocation. The National Park Service, again, Secretary of Interior Standards, and then their preservation technical notes for how to protect these structures. Staff may also employ a registered historian to assist with making the determination of safety. Third on the items to brought to Planning Commission's review are Mills Act contract recommendations, otherwise known as historic property preservation agreements or historic property contracts. I'll be referring to them generally as Mills Act contracts throughout the rest of this presentation, and for most projects that are brought to your review, they'll also be referred to as the Mills Act contract. The Mills Act contract is an agreement between the property owner and local government in order to provide a tax relief for owners of historic resources, who in exchange for regular maintenance, improvements to the designation of designated historic resource. The commitment to preservation of these resources is in line with the city's general plan, cultural resources, preservation elements. Preservation of historic buildings and recognize historic and architectural significance and value, and it provides financial incentives for the federal government in order to maintain, rehabilitate, and preserve these historic resources. Mills Act contract is available to all property owners who are within the city's local register of historic places. As part of this review, staff typically works with the applicant to verify completeness for all legal documents, which includes grant deeds, title reports, any sort of development improvements that have been through the property, and the State Departments of Parks and Recreation's Form 523, which is the typical recorded document for these types of properties. The applicant will also work with staff to identify a list of what we call scheduled improvements, which is part of the contract to ensure the applicant utilizes this tax relief best of their ability. This information is presented to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation to the city manager, and then document will be reported with the city manager and city clerk's office. The Mills Act contract's initial term is 10 years and runs with the property in perpetuity unless the property owner or the city decides to rescind the agreement for whatever reason that may be. This contract includes provisions for periodic city inspections to ensure compliance with the provisions that are set forth in the contract, and the scheduled improvements proposed to the property. To date, the city has entered over 100 Mills Act contracts with property owners, and a majority of them being within the old Escondido neighborhood. And next, so this will be the most rare project which we brought to your purview, which is the historic neighborhood designation. To date, we only have one historic neighborhood, which is the old Escondido neighborhood. And again, I do emphasize this will be briefly brought up because more than likely, actually reaching the threshold for review for these types of projects will not be brought to the Planning Commission. Procedures and finding for the designation of historic resource is found in section 33797 of the Escondido zoning code, which outlines the application process and the criteria for designation of such a resource and district. While applications may be received by the Planning Commission, it is ultimately left to the City Council to decide to initiate the process of a nomination for a historic district. Historical information will be reviewed by staff under the criteria listed in the Escondido zoning code, presenting the Planning Commission for recommendation and finally certified to the council. This process will likely also include regular neighborhood meetings, amendments to the Escondido zoning code, including a new standalone article for the district, and subsequent CEQA environmental review. To date, well, again, only the old Escondido neighborhood has been designated by the city, and properties within the boundaries are additionally governed by Article 65 of the Escondido zoning code. Portions of the Downtown Pacific Plan are designated as historic downtown. However, it's not a historic district based on state and city guidelines. There have been some inquiries in the past in relation to additional districts that may be under the review. However, none were officially applied for nor submitted. As a final portion of this presentation, I'd like to provide the Planning Commission with regards to the California Environmental Quality Act, or again, CEQA, as its role of the Planning Commission's determination. CEQA guideline section 15064.5 provides information regarding the determination of significance of impacts that are determined to be architectural, historical, and cultural resources. First, planning staff will seek to identify whether the existing structure or the site meets the criteria for a resource under the Public Resources Code 5024.1, which states generally that historic resource would be considered significant in the California Register of Historical Resources. However, this is not a requirement for the designation. The city may also utilize its own criteria for local register designation under section 33794. After determining significance, city staff will then be required to determine the impact of the project and its said resource. A project with an effect that may cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of the historic resource is a project that may have a significant effect on the environment. Significant alterations up to and including demolition and parts of the entirety of the resource would constitute a significant impact with further delineation and criteria provided by the CEQA guidelines. Projects which require significant environmental review, such as negative declarations or even environmental impact reports, will include mitigation measures which provide some level of preservation to the resource in question. The implementation of these mitigation measures will typically depend on the project. For instance, if the structure is ideally to maintain, there will be construction measures which seeks to reduce the impact of any potential damage, or implement some level of improvements to the property, such as seismic retrofitting or some level of improvement to the property. If demolition of the resource is proposed, then there may be measures in place for a small or as full documentation of the resource to potentially even relocation of the structure in its entirety. And with that, now staff concludes their presentation. The Commission's current roles and responsibilities for historic preservation. Staff, including myself and our city planner, are available for any questions the Planning Commission.
What is the criteria that you determine, let's say, a single family residence as a historical? Is it based on age or what?
Yes, so there are a number of criteria. The city of Escondido, we have 7 adopted criteria for a local register of historic places. Primarily, the most common ones are age and architectural style. There's a total of 7 criteria for single family homes, which I did print that out, so I can tap about this exactly. Resources strongly identified with a person or persons of significant impact to the city. Buildings that extinguish distinguishing characteristics of our architectural type. Historic resources connected with a business or use that is once common but now rare. Sites of significant historic events. 50 years old, which have achieved historical significance within that time. Historical resources that are important key focal point and visual quality or character of the neighborhood. And then again, the last one would be historic building that is one of the few remaining examples of the city possessing distinguished characteristics of architecture. Those are the typical standards for these cities adopted ordinances. California resources, I believe what was the name of that? The California does have their own basically integrity rules that are very similar to ours. Of course, they're different. And if they don't meet our criteria, we do evaluate them under the state's law.
And I'll
Thank you,
just
Alex.
add to that, Commissioner Jester, for that question. Our criteria is you have to meet 2 of those criteria in order to be eligible
Okay.
to be listed.
One of them has to be 50 years old, right?
Typically, that is a requirement.
Yeah,
Very much the most.
There's a lot of houses that are 50 years old.
Now there is,
Oh, got it.
That's-
There would have to be
And that's why we
some
require.
other significant,
Yeah, there's,
like somebody grew up in the house that became famous or something. I don't know.
And again, one of the most common ones we see is architectural style.
Yeah, architectural style.
Most of them are aged and then architectural
Got
style, but still something.
I have 2 questions and it's not really pertinent to anything, but have we ever done an inspection and have we ever rescinded a contract?
Yes, so the last Mills contract inspections were in 2008 and 2017. They were sort of the regular ones that we had with our previous historic.
Well, in 17 we tried, but because of Brown Act, we never did them.
I believe there were some that were conducted, I remember it was like between 10 and 20, and then there were some.
I think we tried. I think a lot of
Is that
people
correct?
call us back.
Yeah,
We can go ahead and
They're
confirm
like,
whether,
we're not here,
yeah, we can confirm whether staff were.
but we can't do it now, right? Because of Brown Act, we weren't able to do it because we couldn't be together to go to people's houses.
So I would defer to Garrett, our city attorney, if she wants to chime in at all, but ultimately, I think we'd have to look into what was proposed at that time, since neither Alex nor I were here at the
Yeah.
time to know what.
We were basically, at the time, we were just trying to say, like, can we go to these people's houses and see if they've kept up to their contract or not? And it was determined in a meeting, I think it was Adam or Paul at the time, that because of the Brown Act, we couldn't, there wasn't a way we could legally do it.
So I will say that it's not uncommon for jurisdictions who offer or have Mills Act contracts to have staff who do those inspections, not to put that on their Historic Preservation Commission
Makes sense.
to potentially avoid such issues.
Yeah.
And the reason that you would want to inspect or whatever is
Well-
because they're getting funding?
Well, no, they're getting a tax, so like my
Oh,
house
tax
is worth
write-off.
$3.5 million, my tax is $3,000 a year. Because I have a Mills Act home, right? But I spend an ungodly amount of money on my home, so the Mills Act, it's like, it's not really savings. But a lot of people get the Mills Act and then they don't do anything in their house. And so you drive around town, you see these historic homes with 6-foot weeds and windows falling apart, but they're getting the tax benefit.
So just to clarify, yes, Commissioner Jester, to Commissioner Krell's point, you would provide this contract agreement that says we will do these improvements over this 10-year period
Maintenance, upkeep.
in lieu of, and those
Yeah.
10 items typically are in an effort to better the historic preservation of the home.
So it sounds like it's not really a wash, is it?
No, I mean, you don't buy the old home because of the tax write-off, because you love it.
Commissioner Vaccaro?
And I just also want to add too, for those of you who don't live in the old Escondido Historic District, Mark has lived there before, I live there now. Despite the incredible outreach and education that our city does for people that are going in to get their COAs, there are a lot of people that buy homes that have no idea that they actually have to get approval for any adjustments.
Yeah.
And they will start in on their work and just change things, never getting approval or never understanding that they need to. And it is horrifying in our neighborhood to see that happen.
And that is because they've already been registered.
That's
as a-
because they have no concept or clue that it's a historic house or understanding that it's a neighborhood. And they will just change the windows out without, permitting or, whichever,
But the-
without getting any
The house was
certificate.
all before they bought the house, it was registered as a
It
historic
registered or
building?
not, it doesn't
Oh,
matter, it's in our
okay,
district.
so it doesn't matter, if it's in your neighborhood
It has to
and
be.
it's not on the registry,
It doesn't
you
matter.
can't do anything to it
Correct.
at all.
Yeah,
Well, you
without,
can, you just have to get a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay.
so it is a constant education in our neighborhood to get people to understand that they need a COA.
It's not hard to get a COA, you just have to go do it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not difficult. So when we first moved there in 2011, we had this impression like it was this big bad wolf in the room. We couldn't do anything to the house.
Right.
And once we started talking to people, like Carol lived 2 doors down from us and Doug lived across the street. And like, once we got to know, we're like, oh, this isn't that bad, right? We just have to do what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right? We can't just go paint the house red or whatever. Like we gotta go through the steps.
Yeah, and there's an old Escondido Historic District Board that is there to help people with
Mhm.
things like this as well. But I just want to point that out because despite the outreach that our city does, there are still people that
They
just
don't know. They're not
have no, yeah, and it's a shame.
And Alex,
Is there-
when there's an occurrence, as Commissioner McCurry just described, what are the city's actions?
It's usually code
On
enforcement.
the technical statement, if they do not receive a certificate of appropriateness for any of their work, that is a direct violation of our municipal code. Unfortunately, we don't have the bridges at the moment to patrol these kinds of things. However, I do know that the old Escondido neighborhood does a number of members who are concerned for their neighborhood. And they will report these violations to our code compliance in order to get
Endlessly.
these kinds of things. And we do our best in order to assist these property owners to rectify any discrepancies that we identify. But sometimes we are unable to see all the things that happen. So it is a requirement in our zoning code for anything in the old OEN or a historic property to receive a certificate of appropriateness for any change.
Okay, so that's the question of policing. But if you find them in violation, do you require them to correct them or fine? Okay, I'm getting.
Yeah, right. That's your code enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's been homes that have had to take out their vinyl windows and completely restore, what was done. And they always turn out more beautiful in the end after that, but
Thank you. I'll let you answer the question. Are there any, Mr. Stevie?
Yeah, so how serious is the problem of people doing this? Is this like a big challenge right now? People taking advantage of the Mills Act?
It's not so much people taking advantage of the Mills Act, because I'd say that most people that buy historic homes are interested in them and interested in, you know, the upkeep and the maintenance and all the cool things that you can do in, you know, restoration and whatnot. It's more the wannabe small developer that comes in and buys something and flips it quickly.
And I think to answer your question also, it's not necessarily that we have 100 Mills Act things out there and 80 people are taking advantage. I think no one really knows, right? There's no data that we can go and say like these 100 contracts, they've done all 8 items. It's just a matter of, there's no way to, I never saw a really effective way to be able to go and check. Although you drive around neighborhoods and you see really beautiful houses, and then you see houses that aren't so beautiful. And you kind of hope for the best, right? You know, I've gone and, you know, weed whacked and cleaned up people's yards for free just to help out. I'm like, all right, well, this one house has weeds that are 6 feet tall. Let's just clean it up for them. But you don't really know. I don't think it's a pervasive problem. There's probably a couple people, but there's no real way that I ever saw that we could check. You give them a contract, but you can't enforce the contract.
Are you a real estate agent? I am. Okay. Is it required disclosure, you know, when you're selling?
I don't know, I don't know if it's necessarily required disclosure, but I would absolutely want to disclose it. Because if I was selling a house that was a Mills Act and I had reduced property taxes, I would want the buyer to know that. And I wouldn't want the new person, because the new person has to agree to the contract, correct?
So the contract is recorded on the property,
Yeah.
not necessarily with the person. Yeah, but as part of the documentation
So
of real estate, I
title.
assume that they would receive this
Yeah.
document. that they have.
It'll become on the title.
So it would certainly,
But agents just don't know to necessarily call it out and what it means.
Some, yeah, because some just aren't knowledgeable. You know,
Yeah,
most of the agents that work at Old Escondido.
most of them do, but there's a lot that don't. They're just so stupid. They stand there and like, we can go in because everyone wants to see the open houses, right?
Right.
And we'll ask if it's on the Mills Act and they have no comprehension.
Knows what?
Exactly,
Oh,
yeah.
It's the same thing with like Adobe homes, like my house is Adobe and I'm on the Adobe Home Association. We get people to go to sell their houses, buy houses, and they have no idea what they're getting into. And it's a whole different animal.
Are there any additional questions for staff or comments? No? Thank you, Alex. Okay, so we're going to move on to the hearing. Application for an addition to a local registered property at 225 West 6th Avenue. Can we have a staff report, please? Oh, are there any disclosures?
Nope.
Okay, proceed.
Good evening, Vice Chair and Commissioners. My name is Melissa DeMarza. I'm Assistant Planner. And the item before you today is a recommendation to approve a design review for the demolition of a 276 square foot patio cover in addition to a single family residence at 225 West 6th Avenue in the Old Escondido neighborhood. So the residence is located on the south side of West 6th Avenue between South Escondido Boulevard and South Maple Street. Single-family residence was built in approximately 1920, and it's listed on the city's local register. It is within the Old Escondido neighborhood. It's listed as individually significant on the city's historic resources inventory. So the photos here show the front of the primary residence from 6th Avenue and the detached accessory dwelling unit and garage from the rear alley. And the exterior of the primary residence is currently clapboard siding on all elevations, and the covered patio extends from the rear of the home as shown here. And so the project plans are provided here. The applicant is requesting to remove the existing rear patio cover and create an addition of 276 square feet of habitable space and 163 square foot covered patio at the rear of the primary residence. For the exterior addition, the applicant is proposing to match the existing residence in materials and colors as shown here, including windows, doors, roofing, decking, and paint. As shown in the elevations here, the habitable addition will be to the east rear side of the residence, and an elevated covered patio area will be added to the rear west side. The stairs, access to the patio and French doors will be constructed on the west side of the residence. And a wood handrail and guardrail will be installed along the rear elevation of the patio in line with the habitable addition using the specifications shown here in detail T1. As shown on the existing and proposed floor plans, the addition will consist of a bedroom, pantry, 2 closets, and a covered patio area at the rear of the primary residence. And the roof for the addition will match the existing slope by extending the current roof line. So the proposed demolition and subsequent additions meet the design criteria for homes in the Old Escondido neighborhood. The additions will be toward the rear of the property and will not be easily visible from the street, and therefore not impact the character of the home from the street. Using the clapboard siding for the addition to the primary residence will create cohesion and not impair the architectural style of the home. The new residence will match the materials and style of the existing primary residence windows. And the proposed new doors will not be visible from the street and will not impact the character of the home. The proposed roofing will match the current roof of the primary residence in pitch, materials, and in color. The staff recommends the Planning Commission approve Resolution 2024-13 and recommend approval of the issuance of certificate of appropriateness to the Director of Development Services. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff and the applicant are available to address commissioners' questions.
Any questions to staff?
I have no.
Just
Are you the owner?
I am the owner, sir.
You're the owner. So have you sourced this clapboard siding?
I know it's expensive, but the answer, go ahead, I'm sorry.
are we, we'll ask questions to the applicant after we ask questions to staff.
What if the clapboard siding isn't available?
If it is not available, then
Yeah.
they would have to propose a suitable replacement that would be similar to that original historic
Okay.
material.
Yeah, I've done a number of these homes. Nobody has those knives. You can't get that stuff. It's not out there. We did a bunch of houses in North Park and we finally found somebody that had the knives to cut that. It's cut out of redwood up in Northern California. It's like 25 years ago. It's just not around.
But I wonder, does the material, redwood, it doesn't have to.
It doesn't matter. You can't cut it. You can cut it out of whatever you want, Doug Fir. You can't cut that. You can't match that.
You mind if I speak or am I allowed to speak?
Oh, yeah.
So I've gone through about 6 contractors and they're all able to say they could replicate it. But that's my biggest concern. And it's very expensive to do clapboard siding. It's like you said, it's not available with ease anymore. You can't just go to Lowe's or Dixieland or whatever to replicate that. So, but all 6 of them said they could do it. So I proceeded to go with this. I think that's enough people to be able to go on it. If it was just one guy, that'd be different, right?
I have a question too. I couldn't really read the building record. When was the ADU built?
Around 2008, but I believe I was not the owner then.
Was the house in the registry then? I'm just curious.
So ADUs are done administratively per the state. So those would not go through like an HPC process. They would be required to match the materials and colors of the existing residents, but they would not go through the same level of review.
And they don't get the tax benefit because they're not 50 years old.
Right, I asked that because the ADU in the garage are board and batten. It's a completely different siding. So I'm just wondering, did it go through some kind of process when they built it? Or seems to be, I don't know.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Jester, for that question. I think ultimately the item that's listed on the local register is the primary residence. Melissa, is that correct? So the ADU doesn't necessarily have to be in the same, have the same clapboard siding. It just has to be similar materials and colors. It's not a part of the local registered component of the resource itself. It's separate too. So the primary residence, the home itself, is the historic resource.
Got it. Okay. I had a couple other questions, if you don't mind. The windows in the bedroom, they're not gonna meet egress. What's up with that?
So that would be something that would be reviewed during the building plan check process.
Okay,
And if it ultimately changed the scope of the window, that would come back to staff for confirmation. As would if the applicant could not locate clapboard siding and had to propose a different type of siding, then that would come back to city's planning staff to evaluate for appropriateness for the historic resource.
okay, got it. Then the French door in the back. The plan, I don't think it said what it was, but I noticed that in the picture, there was true divided lights on the existing French doors in the back, but in the elevation, it wasn't, is that supposed to match, or I don't know, I'm asking the question.
So it was provided to be the French door style. I don't know if applicant can speak to the specifics of.
I'll be honest, I won't understand what I told you. I'll just speak some.
Let's see.
Is it on the elevation? Can you show us the page?
Yeah, you can show if you can.
Let me ask, relevant to that question, on the criteria in table 1, it sounded like the criteria was how it looked from the street and not from the back. So
Correct.
is this level of detail relevant to the question?
From an HPC standpoint, it can be like we could suggest to use a specific kind of door and then we would vote on it. But from like, whether it's got panes or not, it's something you could just comment to them, yeah.
As
It's
a
not
comment,
visible from, it's just a comment.
it's not part of our criteria.
Correct. It's a design review.
Okay, now I'm really confused.
So
Either it's supposed to look like the original or it's
From the front.
not,
On the front.
only from the front.
Correct.
Okay. The reason I asked was because can you see that door?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, the one on the elevation was just a single pane. That's why I asked. I guess we don't have to match it. So.
I'd like to just clarify for everyone here, the request before you is to make a recommendation to the Director of Development Services for the issuance of the certificate of appropriateness, which is the permit granting the approval of the addition for the historic resource. You may evaluate the design review of what is proposed against the historic preservation design guidelines, which are the adopted guidelines by the city for historic resources. Staff provided a table that outlines the requirements in the design guidelines that are applicable to this property and how they comply. We welcome recommendations or suggestions. However, the threshold is those design guidelines. So if the design guidelines, for example, specify that the additions should be placed at the rear of the property of a resource to reduce the physical impacts from the public right of way. That's a design recommendation that the guidelines stipulate. We work with the applicant to get them there. They can always choose not to listen to staff and the guidelines, and that's where the planning commission would intervene and say, we recommend you actually abide by the guidelines, for example, and make a recommendation of approve or not approve to the director. So we can speak to the design merits of it, but ultimately what the applicant is subject to are those design guidelines and not items outside of the design guidelines.
But you're asking us to approve based upon the package that was submitted to us. And it's pretty basic. I'm not.
We're asking for a recommendation.
A recommendation.
Yes.
Commissioner Corral.
A recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness.
So having been involved,
Approval.
having been involved in hundreds of these, this is done very well. Good job. The only question I would have based on my experience is, do you know the material that the door is made of? Is it wood or vinyl? It's wood. Motion to approve.
Are we done talking about it?
Well, I'm just saying that based on
We'll wait
what
for
our
the-
job is,
Okay.
this is done very well. This would pass an HPC board easily.
Well, that's fine.
Okay.
But I'm not there yet.
Okay,
Okay?
We'll hold
Give me a
on the
break.
motion for
yeah, of course, no, I'm just. Good job. Thanks,
So
sir.
just a point of order, the motion's been made, but it hasn't been seconded, so.
now. Oh, and I haven't
Tell
closed
us.
the public hearing.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Well, everyone's very excited about your projects.
I do have one more question if I could.
Please.
I'm trying to figure this, floor area ratio there. Can somebody explain to me that's 50% of the max allowable buildable area of the lot is 50%, correct?
So if the FAR is 50% or 0.5, then the total allowed area of structures on the site is 50% of the total area of the lot.
Well, if that's the case, then I come up with 63%. Because 2,113 divided into 3,358 is 63%.
I would need to take a look at the plans, and that's something.
I'm just going off of the calculations that were made on here, on the plans, from the plans.
You are aware that's not our job.
I'm just asking a question.
That's planning
Okay.
and building's job.
Are you telling me my job?
No, I'm saying that's not our job, that's their. job.
I'm bringing up a very valid question.
Okay.
Okay?
So I think we will take that input, we'll assess. I will ask Melissa, is the lot greater than 3,000 square feet in size, or is the lot size that 3,000 number?
No,
I think just looking at what Commissioner Jester has here, there's like this weird FAR equals, and there are two numbers that if you divide them, it gives you 63%. But I don't know if it's meant to be a mathematical formula.
So we can definitely confirm prior to any sort of granting of the certificate of appropriateness. So to clarify, if the commission were to recommend approval and approve the resolution in front of you this evening, that would be a recommendation to the director to approve it. However, it's not an automatic approval. It's not that you make this recommendation this evening and there's no recourse, it's just approved. There then is remitted back to staff. Staff works to finalize the project requirements, which would assess that FAR point. Commissioner Jester, to your concern, we would vet that, ensure that is compliant. And if for any reason the FAR was not, and it resulted in a redesign, if that redesign is substantive, it would come back here.
What are the requirements? I mean, I like it. I mean, it's nice. I don't have a problem with it at all. I'm just asking I'm a builder. This is what I do. This is what I've been doing for 45 years. And I see things in here that I have questions about, and maybe they're appropriate, maybe they're not. Does an addition to a house on the registry, do they have to abide by Title 24 requirements?
That's a question I would have to defer to our building official and follow up with you on. There are specific historic resource codes.
That don't have.
On the building code section, but I can't speak to that. I would have to get you precise information from our building official. I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
Two other questions I had. What is the floor material on the deck in the back? Just
Right
curious.
now,
Yeah, no, the new deck.
well, initially, I talked to the architect and we agreed on T-Rex, because good work. Trex, exactly, because I guess that stays longer than wood. But I was told that there's a possibility that I might be forced to have wood.
Oh, okay, because of the registry thing.
Which doesn't really make sense because you're looking at it from it will be an issue if it goes from the front, but this is in the back.
Okay. Well, I didn't realize, since it's in the back, you can do whatever you want, so. I'm good with it.
And I apologize if I was able to pull up the plans. They're under copyright protection, so they're not in the packet, as you all know. To clarify, Commissioner Jester, on the FAR, the 2,113 over the 3,358 is simply depicting the proposed FAR over the maximum allowed FAR, showing that it is in fact less than what the maximum amount is allowed under the site.
Okay, thank you.
So it wasn't an equation.
It was.
It looks like an equation.
Yeah, it did.
Commissioner Steven?
Yeah, I had a question for you. I agree, it looks beautiful, well done. When you bought the home, I'm curious to our earlier conversation, what sort of education were you given around, like, what would be required of you if you wanted to make improvements to this ADU? I'm just kind of curious to hear your experience for a moment.
When I bought the house, so if you don't mind, I went to a little bit of my story. So I was in the Marine Corps, just retired.
Oh, thank you for your service.
Thank you for it. Bought the house in 2015. And when I was going through the final paperwork, that's when I found out about the house being historical and its historical requirements.
So you discovered that?
I discovered it, yes. So it wasn't until I actually went to City Hall and actually found out all those details was required to stay within the historical preservation. Now, obviously, because of my military career, yes, I try to maintain the house, and I do. I think I do to the best of my ability, but when you have orders to Japan, orders to Arizona, and you're out of the state, let alone the country, there's this constant communication I have of whoever my tenant was before, my wife stayed behind. I think that communication, but I think for the most part, I've tried to have that constant communication to make sure that I aren't within the confines of the Preservation Act, whatever you want to call it. So I try my best, but long story short, I've taken that extra action to know what I need to do to make sure that I'm following line of what's needed. If that makes sense. I understand that not everybody's like that, just how I am. I blame the Marine Corps, but.
And the house isn't Mills Act, it's just on the register, right?
Excuse me,
It's not Mills Act, it's just on the register, right?
Mills Act, it is.
It is on the Mills Act,
It
so you
is.
get the property tax that
I do. What you described and what you described, yes, that's correct.
And what's your experience been like working with the city? You can be honest.
Okay,
Alex, do you want to leave the room?
oh, no, you sort of been awesome, great. So,
Never complained about Alex.
so there was a time that back house, it was not an ADU, it was a recreational room, and then I tried to convert it to an ADU. That was pretty painful because if there was an issue, I go to city or code enforcement, I'm like, hey, what's the issue? It really give me an answer. And it wasn't until they found out, again, I was a Marine, going to having orders to Japan, someone had a soft spot for Marines. They kind of expedited the process for me. Now, if I wasn't a Marine, I don't think that would have happened, but I kind of got hooked up. So that's the negative. But when it comes to what I'm talking about now, these two have been great. No complaints, no issues whatsoever.
And if I may interject, Melissa, can you confirm this project was impacted by the Article 40 changes, correct? Correct. So this was one of the few projects that resulted in delays as a result of the Article 40 changes and the HPC dissolution. So there is an additional wait time associated with this request.
Got it. That's interesting. In one more question, and you can refuse to answer if you'd like, but in retrospect, do you regret having purchased in a historic district?
No, not at all. It's been great. There is different, how do I describe this? So I live on, you know where I live.
They all drove by.
As you go east, like towards, we call it, as you go like Maple, Broadway, Camilla, Juniper, you keep on going east.
Yeah.
You notice people tend to take care of their houses much better than as you go west.
Yeah.
As you go west, you see a lot of rentals, demographics change. That's another story from here, but so kind of what you're talking about tends to, as you go west, people could care less.
No, as you go east. Oh,
No,
sorry, west.
West,
Yes.
yes,
west.
west. As you get east, people tend to care more.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are a lot of.
What's the, why?
West.
Do you have a theory?
I do.
So
Nice.
It's where Carrie lives.
Well, that's what used to be to replicate her.
So where I live is like, you have a map of, you mind going to the couple slides back? You mind if I stand up and?
Yeah, you go for it.
Okay. Right there. Okay, so let's see.
You're outlining.
That's Sixth Avenue, right? I know I'm pretty tall. I cover a lot of space, so. Just this block right here.
Yeah.
Rental, homeowner. rental, homeowner, rental, business,
And like liquor store and.
liquor store.
Yeah.
So, where as you go to the next block, you get more homeowners.
Yeah.
Interesting. At least you can walk to Lourdes.
Say it again?
So at least you can walk to Lourdes.
Oh, that's true.
That's interesting. So, I mean, I just think the historic neighborhood in the city is so cool and is a huge asset, and I would love to see more foot traffic and attention drawn to that community. And I was just curious to know from your experience, what that might look like even from our end.
I will be honest, if I could move my house 10 houses west, I absolutely would.
East.
Or east, sorry. See, you.
I'm on 7th and Juniper right next to the beach house.
Okay.
So I live next to the glory of all glory.
Yeah.
The jewel.
The prettiest house that'll never sell.
They're trying to make it a museum.
They should make it the best Airbnb
Exactly.
ever.
Well, thank you. That's super helpful, and I appreciate you coming in tonight.
I'll sort of put it. Okay.
Are there any additional questions or comments?
I would just like to say thank you for table one. I thought that was very efficient and helpful in being able to compare and look at what we needed to. So thank you.
Commissioner Corral, did you have a comment you want to make?
Other than the motion.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
I just want to let you guys know that the Old Escondido Historic District, if you ever participate in any of the board meetings that we have or the neighborhood events, do you know about them?
I do, but like I said, most of the time I'm gone.
If you're not-
I was in the military, gone, so.
Well, if you ever need assistance with anything, you can easily reach out to the board and they'd be happy to help you.
Is Lisa still around?
Lisa's around, but she's not on.
She's not in there.
No, she was on the HPC though.
Okay.
But everyone is really nice on it. And one of the things to your question about trying to improve the neighborhood that we are trying to get a neighborhood grant for is, it's a walking program that we're copying La Mesa. And basically what we've been calling it is the polka dot walking program. And basically our directive is we want to create, the pathway from downtown, like Grand Avenue, up into our neighborhood, so it connects it more. And so basically, we would have markers in the street in front of each of the significant historic houses, and then an app that would correlate with that while people are on their walking
Oh,
tour,
that's right.
that they could
That's
see
a
it
good
in the
idea.
street, pull up the house, get the
Like
history,
San
et cetera.
Francisco, they pirate.
Yeah, and La Mesa actually implemented this program throughout one of their communities, and it was a big success. So we've had that on our radar to do for a while, but the city hasn't had any money and we haven't organized to get the grant for it yet. But that's one way we want to try to get more of an emphasis of go down to Grand, shop, eat, do your walk, and make the connection between downtown and our neighborhood, since we're so close to it.
Any other additional questions or comments? Would you like to make any additional comments?
No, I appreciate you taking time to review that's it.
Thank you. Alex, did we receive any written communications addressing this?
No written communication.
Okay, I'll close public hearing, open for a motion. Commissioner Corral has made a motion. Is there a second?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Corral, second by Commissioner Spear. Call for the vote.
Vice Chair Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner McCall,
Approved.
Commissioner Spear,
Yes.
Commissioner Jester,
Yes.
Commissioner Steve,
Approve.
and Commissioner Crowe.
Approve.
Vote is 6-0 to recommend approval.
Congrats.
Good luck with
You're
your
done, sir.
project.
You're
You're all
finished.
set? Oh, okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
Pleasure talking to you all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're coming in very long. If you-
Y'all good night. Please
You
do.
too.
And it's 6 guys.
Okay, any future agenda items?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I'm on the other end.
Okay. Are there any future agenda items?
So, yes, but not for our next meeting.
Oh, ooh. She's
Well,
excited about
I
something.
get two opportunities to talk about this. It's a little, so,
Well, so just to clarify, I think actually this question is whether any of the planning commission wants to put anything in the agenda.
love
And
that.
then the planning commissioner report, the planner's report is when you.
Okay.
I actually, maybe along the lines of what we just discussed, I don't know quite how this works, but in talking to some of the city council members, I've gotten the impression that part of what they want us to do here is to elevate to their attention things that we think are noteworthy, right? Because they're doing 10,000 different things and they're not really aware on the day-to-day of what is coming across our desk. So maybe this is a good opportunity to elevate to their attention your project and just say, hey, look, this, there's a lot of forward momentum here happening with the historic district in Escondido. The people who live there really care about it. And we would like to see more traffic drawn to it. I don't know if this is the forum for that.
So just to clarify, because of public noticing requirements, if you have something that you want to place on the agenda, you can put that item on the agenda, but we can't discuss it ahead
Not
of time.
tonight, it'd have to be for
because-
future.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you just kind of, if you want to put something on the agenda, you just have to state the item as clearly as you can that you want to place on the agenda, and then the commission can talk about it at the next.
So that if I was to like bracket that, I would bracket it as a conversation around how to elevate the profile of the historic district and take a formal recommendation to the city council.
Is there a second?
Sure, second.
Yeah.
Okay, so the discussion for future agenda item. Okay, very good. There's no one left unless someone's hiding for any oral communications. So, and any planning commission reports? None? City planner, your report?
Yes, so we will not be holding an August 13th planning commission meeting. That meeting is canceled. I believe that the staff or the improvements to the council chambers may still be ongoing into August, so we're just going to cancel that meeting so no one's disappointed. And we'll plan to reconvene on August 27th and go from there.
They're improving that. Are they gonna fix the chair?
I was like, the chairs.
I do not know the scope of the improvement, so we may submit an email to
That's a
Zach
big planning
City
question
Clerk.
right there.
What is with I don't have a complaint.
You've never got.
You haven't.
Oh, there's a badger.
We'll make sure you have it.
Be really early the next day.
It's still there.
They just all.
Yeah, I'll be gone all August. I'm going to Italy. Some of Carrie's relatives owe her money. And I'm going to Italy to try to get it back for
Good luck talking to them.
her.
My favorite part is that that's on the record.
Okay, so that completes. Okay, meeting adjourned.